Story 1. Spider-Man. He could have ignored his Uncle Ben's advice, gone wild, and cleaned up the city in 2 to 3 weeks if he really tried. He'd have Norman Osborn's head wrapped up in a web. Story 2. Aang could have been a monster after coming out of the iceberg and finding out what happened to his people, family, and mentor. Story 3. Bilbo Baggins. When the most evil object in the world corrupted kings, warriors, and other hobbits, this old man just willingly leaves it for his nephew. Also, in the book, he is the first to offer to take the journey to destroy the ring. When most people couldn't resist temptation, Bilbo proves time and again to be a real hero when no one else could. Jotr. Tolkien has made it clear that no one would have had the will to resist Sauron in Mount Doom, but Bilbo showed more will than perhaps anyone in the Legendarium. With what a stressful time it has been in the world, it really warmed my heart to engage in a really fun discussion about the characters and world of Tolkien's Legendarium. I also wanted to mention that in highlighting Bilbo, it was not to downplay Frodo and Sam. I think that he would have struggled greatly to accomplish what they did. But the focus of the question is who had every right to become a villain, and after such long exposure to the ring, not knowing what it was and actively using it, it would have been hard to blame Bilbo had he become a villain, which he did not, despite struggling with temptations. Story 4. Candace Flynn from Phineas and Ferb is caught in an endless summer and is constantly disbelieved. I am surprised anyone lived. Story 5. Pongo and Perdita from 101 Dalmatians. Cruella kidnapped their puppies and planned to murder and skin them. No one would have blamed them for mauling her to death. Story 6. Geralt of Rivia is seen as a monster by other humans and faces discrimination throughout his life. He is often not paid enough or at all for the jobs he undertakes. Despite his efforts to do good, he is consistently treated as an outcast and a monster. Nevertheless, he is a good man who tries to help whenever he can. Story 7. Ted Lasso. His wife left him because of issues in their marriage. His new boss hired him because she thinks he is not competent, and most of the team he is hired to manage dislikes him and treats him poorly. There is more to the story, but he pours all his energy into helping others, and they all take opportunities to take advantage of him. It is never confirmed that Michelle actually betrayed Ted with their therapist, but the two of them entering into a relationship was a significant betrayal on both their parts. Story 8. I honestly don't know a lot about him, but from what I have seen and from surrounding character discussions, Rocket Raccoon. Story 9. Guts from Berserk grew up in extreme hardship, was betrayed in the worst way possible, but fought against the cycle of hatred. Story 10. Jerry from Parks and Recreation. The man had a great home life, but I hated every single time he was mistreated. It really made me angry. Story 11. Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid. The man is used and abused, literally created for the sole purpose of being used by the United States government, and he still does the right thing until the very end. Story 12. This might still be up in the air, but the doctor from Doctor Who decided that the best way to wipe out the Daleks, a frequently revisited enemy, and stop them from destroying his planet was to blow up the planet. Left unchecked and without a companion to let him know when he is going too far, he will destroy and take vengeance on whole civilizations that wrong him or the people he cares about. He will shoot someone dead if there is no one to remind him to give his plan a second thought. He will change, alter, and meddle until all of time rips apart if no one can stop him, or no one is willing to stop him or speak out against it. He has basically already been a villain of some sort, which is why I say it is still up in the air, as people have different opinions on what makes him a hero or a villain since he has been both. What classifies him as a hero in the eyes of writers, fans, and producers is his intention to be good, kind, loving, and generally do things without jumping to violence. Yet he can flip that switch to dark and almost cruel instantly. It is a credit to the many actors over the years who have played this character that make his morals such a highly debated subject. If the Doctor were not framed as this highly intelligent, benevolent, smart, quirky character who, for the most part, does not fight monsters with guns or weapons, he would be one of the most evil and terrifying characters on television. Story 13. The Creature from the Black Lagoon. He never did anything wrong, never hurt anyone, and after 3 movies of abuse, he took his own life to end the torment. Story 14. Alexstrasza literally had most of her flight wiped out by Deathwing, was captured and tortured, and forced to be a sex slave by the old horde. She lost her aspect powers to help save the world and, once again, had nearly all of the infants of her flight wiped out by a crazy murderer for a cool-looking dragon mount. She has seen some terrible things. Story 15. The Doctor after the series was rebooted in 2005. He had just survived the Time War, one of the most devastating conflicts in fiction where billions died every second. And not only that, he had witnessed the destruction of his entire race. It would have been enough to drive anybody mad or malevolent. Instead, it made him care more, and he wanted to help people wherever he could. When I close my eyes, I hear more screams than you could ever be able to count. And do you know what you do with all that pain? Shall I tell you where you put it? You hold it tight until it burns your hand. Then you say this: no one else will ever have to live like this. No one else will ever have to feel this pain. Not on my watch. Story 16. The main character of Persona 5 was falsely charged with assault after saving a woman from a creepy politician. He received probation and had to transfer schools. He encounters more corruption and dishonest behavior. Story 17. Elsa. Seriously, I was watching the first movie, just waiting for her to be the antagonist. Disney backed away from what would have been an epic villain with a heart-wrenching backstory. Story 18. John Spartan is a character from the film Demolition Man. He was falsely accused and imprisoned in an experimental procedure that left him frozen but awake and aware for decades. He is brought back and told he is just a tool to be used to track down the criminal responsible for the whole mess. However, everyone he meets in this so-called perfect society treats him like he is subhuman. They are lucky he did not just join the group that wants to burn it all down. Story 19. Mutwo. He only ever knew the ugly side of humanity, being treated as a test subject and a living weapon. It is hard to blame the individual for wanting to erase a species that he experienced only as power-hungry and cruel. Until he met Ash and Pikachu. Story 20. Kaladin was betrayed and hurt by the nobles. He had every right to be just like Moshe and go after them, but he was an adult. He grew and decided to live with honor instead of being a gross little weird person. Story 21. Harry Potter. Bro went through 5 stages of grief and somehow remained the good guy. Frodo and Bilbo too. Story 22. Andy Sachs from The Devil Wears Prada. Her boyfriend and friends were so mean to her, and she still forgave them. Story 23. Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. Poor kid is raised by a man who literally just planned to eat him, and that man dies and leaves the kid alone. Then Vivi gets conned with fake theater tickets on his first outing alone, goes through a lot of stress with a street punk rat kid manipulating him into breaking the law. Later, he finds out he is a prototype and his people were, in fact, not people but manufactured as mindless war machines made to invade other countries and kill innocent people. He has multiple existential crises about what he is and how long he has to live, discovers some of the other puppets woke up like him and escaped, and tried to live peacefully in a rural area. Then they get murdered in front of him, and the only people that he thinks of as friends, the closest he has to family, are all under some fairly extreme stress, dealing with nightmarish levels of disruption to their lives, trying to save the world eventually because they get involved with truly epic levels of chaos. He just gets dragged along and tries his best while constantly wondering if he might drop dead because his battery ran out at any moment. No one would blame him for going full supervillain. Story 24. Fitz Chivalry from the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb is a trained assassin who is brutalized, tortured, and used throughout his entire life. Story 25. Kakashi from Naruto. Everyone in his life died or killed themselves through horrible means. He was even forced to kill his own teammate. His other deceased teammate gave him his left eye as a gift after his own was sliced. His spiral into depression was so profound that he joined a covert operations division of his village and was able to carry out missions without barriers. He could have easily turned evil, bitter, and hateful toward his village for the loss of everyone in his life. But instead, he had one friend who helped pull him out of that grief and anger and who stuck by him into their older age in retirement. Story 26. Rey from the Star Wars sequels would have been far more interesting had she fallen. Then Ben or Finn would have to redeem her. Story 27. Obi-Wan Kenobi went through everything Darth Vader went through, arguably more. Still, despite all the pain and suffering, he stayed true to his Jedi roots and remained a hero. Story 28. Hank Pym. He had all the makings of a supervillain origin story. A rogue experiment allowed him to shrink, and he figured out a way to control ants. He first put on the costume after secret agents killed his wife for political reasons. A robot whose artificial intelligence was patterned on his own brain synapses almost instantly became a supervillain hellbent on the extermination of all humans. He even experienced several mental breakdowns that led to divorce and his expulsion from the Avengers. Yet, through it all, Hank remained a steadfast superhero. Story 29. Michael Bluth. That man did everything in his power to keep his family together, and they took advantage and betrayed him time and time again. There were a couple of times he nearly snapped, but they dragged him back in. Story 30. News photographer Phil Sheldon. He is from the Marvel comic series. He lost an eye photographing a fight between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. The whole premise of the story is that he does not hold a grudge or become a villain because that is what irrational people do. Story 31. Master Chief from Halo, or really any of the Spartans from that group, was stolen from his family as a child, conscripted into the military, forced to undergo painful cybernetic enhancements, and witnessed as well as caused a significant amount of death and destruction. Story 32. The sheer number of people in this comment thread who have actually read the Old Testament is actually pretty impressive. Story 33. Soul games don't have too much story, but Nephili Lu in Elden Ring is completely abandoned by two different fathers. She is targeted for assassination by a strange wizard who wants to turn her into a puppet. Ultimately, she ends up helping you defeat her own father and rises to a position of power because you showed her an eagle. Story 34. Not a fictional character, but a real person. Keanu Reeves, after what he has been through, I am shocked by how he is still the sweet person that he is. I am not condoning his being unkind, but I would have expected that considering the tragedy of his life. Story 35. Almost anyone in Duckburg seems to be abandoned by their parents and lives with random uncles and aunts. Story 36. Edward Ilrich and Al Ilrich had the power, the knowledge, and the motivation to become mega-villains. They experienced a very traumatic life and were informed on how to take ultimate power into their own hands. With just one twist down a different path, we may have ended up with a sequel series trying to undo the potential devastation that could have been unleashed by those two. Story 37. Mirabelle from Encanto was being left out of family photos, undervalued, and disrespected by her close family for something she couldn't control. When she has evidence that her family is unhappy and the magic is dying, she gets shut down by her grandmother and is blamed for the destruction because she wanted to learn the truth. Story 38. Maybe not necessarily villain, but Aang absolutely could justifiably have been way more violent than he was. He came back and found his entire culture destroyed but stuck to his teachings. Story 39. Hatake Kakashi is a child prodigy. His father committed suicide, and he lost one of his teammates during a mission, believing he is dead, while he accidentally killed the other. He then joins the ANBU, a combat unit specialized in assassination and high-risk missions, which is not beneficial for mental health either. When he becomes a teacher, one of his students decides to defect and join the enemy. However, he remains loyal to Konoha and does not give up on his students. Story 40. Cinderella. I want to see part 2 where she gets back at all the people on her revenge list, Arya Stark style. Neighbors could have at least called the Department of Children and Families on that nasty child-abusing stepmother. Story 41. Harry Potter, while living with his aunt, uncle, and cousin, faced experiences that could traumatize any child. I do not think anyone can behave normally after being treated poorly while growing up. Story 42. Laura Ingalls could see her discover that her charming character of determination could turn into a master manipulator. Story 43. Korra receives a lot of criticism both in and out of the show and is constantly being blamed for the difficulties in her world when, just like all avatars before her, she is simply picking up the pieces left by her predecessor. Story 44. If I had to live with the Dursleys, I would become the nastiest, most evil dark wizard the world has ever seen. one that would make the Death Eaters look like a gardening club. Story 45. Superman, the sole survivor of Krypton, easily could have wanted to search for his biological parents and his own species. Upon discovering Krypton's history, he could have turned into a raging monster hellbent on revenge. Don't forget he was often bullied growing up, struggled to fit in as a teen, had to learn to control his powers, and was taught to keep them a secret. At times, he was seen as an outcast who didn't belong. He literally had every right to be a villain. Smallville explores this magnificently, especially during episodes where he questions Jonathan Kent about why he should use his powers to play sports. This is why I often say that the true heroes were Pa and Ma Kent. Story 46. Not well known, but Sam Vims from Discworld is a character who is marginalized by society. He is brilliantly devious, full of rage, and eventually becomes very wealthy. Later on, he gains literal dark powers and works as a police officer. Despite his circumstances, he uses his abilities for good, fighting for the working class. Story 47. The Roadrunner was constantly killing the Coyote, but he was never accused of any wrongdoing. He is a villainous murderer. Story 48. Every single Lamanter is not just not corrupt, but as kind as Space Marines get in a setting that tries its best to make that as hard as possible, while having the luck of Wile E. Coyote at the same time. This is a testament to their will and void-shielded adamantite balls. Story 49. Spider-Man, at this point at least, who would blame him for finally snapping and becoming the new kingpin of crime or something? But he really is just too good for the world. Story 50. Echo from Arcane. In the span of a week, he lost 1. His father figure and only guardian, the leader of the Undercity, who was then replaced by a power-hungry Chem Baron. 2 friends who were crushed by rubble. 1 joined the villain, and another was secretly thrown in jail and presumed dead for years afterward. Story 51. Lelouch could have fully leaned into being a tyrannical emperor, reforming the world through violence, and the show still would have made sense. Story 52. Goro Majima. After all the trouble that went down with Makoto Makamura, he had the hitman who shot her dead to rights. Only he let him live because not only would he be no better than said hitman, but there is no way in the world of the Yakuza to repay someone for killing on your behalf. Story 53. Jesus Christ. Ficking dude's dad even sold him out, has a snake telling him to just end it and he can get whatever he wants. Dude should have just said forget it. Story 54. Harry Dresden. The guy had every role model in his life trying to use or betray him, but he always tries to make the right choices because they are right. He gets tempted a lot throughout the series, but he never truly loses sight of right and wrong. Story 55. I know this is a bit controversial, but Goku from Dragon Ball almost every saga gets beaten up, killed, or watches his friends get brutally slaughtered. Plus, all his friends wanted to kill him at some point. Story 56. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Some would argue he had even more reasons to fall to the dark side than Anakin, especially after Anakin turned into Darth Vader. He well and truly lost everything, and yet he did not fall. Story 57. Mad Max tries to uphold the law and keep order intact as the world collapses, only to have his young wife and children run down in the street like animals. Another man might process that feeling into a weapon, searching for power and influence that enable him to channel that agony onto anyone else around him so that he might make himself free. But instead, he decided to ride through the desert with a good dog and drown that feeling, and the villain, with that same backstory, a literal alter ego of our boy, became Furiosus Dementus. Story 58. Obi-Wan Kenobi. His master, Qui-Gon, and his love interest, Satine, were killed right before his eyes. Almost every fellow Jedi he had ever met was killed during Order 66. To his knowledge, and his pupil, best friend, and brother not only turned to the dark side himself but was responsible for many of those aforementioned deaths. That kind of trauma could turn anyone. Many had turned to the dark side for a lot less. Story 59. Naruto should have razed that village to the ground. He was the equivalent of a prince who was treated like evil garbage. That swing needed to go up in flames. Story 60. Lyra Balakwa from his dark materials. She lost both her parents, freed the dead from eternal suffering, saved all intelligent life in the universe. And then Zephania comes along and tells her she cannot be with Will, that there can only be one window between worlds. Story 61. Naruto, brother, if people would throw things at me while I was just trying to walk around on the street when I was only 4, and I had to live alone with little to no help, and then I found out the most powerful leader of the village promised my parents they would take care of me, I would be going full 9 tails on the village and leaving. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.